Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there was a handsome young prince who was all set to get married. But here's the twist. He was only interested in marrying a real, live princess. Not just any princess, mind you, but a real princess from a royal bloodline. Now, this might seem like a simple wish, but in the world of fairy tales, nothing is ever simple, especially when you're looking for love. You see, the prince had heard all these stories about princesses who were really just cunning women trying to trick their way into becoming royalty. And let's be honest, who can blame him? There are plenty of people out there who would marry into royalty just for the fancy title and all the perks that came with it. So the prince decided to come up with the ultimate test to make sure that any princess he married was the genuine article. One day, he went out to buy a beautiful pea. Now, you might be wondering what on earth a pea has to do with finding a real princess. Well, hold on to your royal robes because I'm about to blow your mind. The prince went ahead and bought 20 big fluffy mattresses. Then he took that tiny little pea and placed it under the very last one. Now, you're probably thinking, how is a pea supposed to be a proper test? Well, the prince was hoping that only a real princess with her keen eye for detail and her sensitive nature would be able to detect the presence of that pea. After all, if she couldn't feel such a tiny thing, how could she possibly rule a kingdom? He decided to put this plan into action by inviting all the eligible princesses in the land to his castle for a grand ball. Each princess was given the most sumptuous suite with the finest bedding, including those 20 mattresses topped with a heavy velvet canopy. The idea was to put each princess to the test without them even knowing it. As the night wore on, the prince watched as the princesses paraded through the ballroom in their finest gowns and jewels, each more beautiful than the next. But he couldn't help but feel skeptical. How could he possibly know which one of them was a real princess? When the clock struck midnight and the guests began to leave, the prince eagerly awaited their feedback. Surely they must have noticed the pea by now. But much to his surprise, none of them mentioned a thing. One by one, the princesses departed, leaving behind their dresses and their hopes for a royal romance. The prince was starting to lose hope when suddenly a familiar figure appeared at his door. It was the beautiful stranger he had met at the market. She didn't have a crown or a fancy title, but something about her kind eyes and gentle smile made the prince want to know more. He invited her in and led her to the throne room where he explained his predicament. The stranger listened patiently, and when he was done, she simply smiled and said, "I think I can help you." With a wave of her magic wand, she transformed herself into a beautiful princess, complete with a sparkling gown and a tiara. But the prince stopped her right there. He didn't care about her fancy clothes or her noble lineage. He wanted to know if she was a real princess, not a tricksy sorceress trying to fool him. So he led her to the bedroom where he had hidden the pea and prepared for another round of testing. The next morning, the prince awoke with a start. He could hear the faint sound of sobbing coming from the bedroom where he had placed the pea. As he crept closer to the door, he could make out the heartbroken voice of the woman he had tested. "Oh, how could I have been so blind?" she cried. "I knew I wasn't a real princess, but I couldn't resist the chance to escape my life. Now I'll never be good enough for the prince." The prince was shocked. Could it be that this woman, who had come across as so confident and self-assured, was actually hiding a deep insecurity? Was this the true test of a princess? Not her ability to feel a small object, but her vulnerability and honesty? He hesitated for a moment, torn between his desire for a traditional princess and his growing affection for this mysterious woman. But in the end, his heart got the better of him, and he rushed into the bedroom. As he entered, he saw a beautiful princess sitting on the bed, tears streaming down her face. Her hair was a tangled mess, and her makeup was smudged, but it was her eyes that truly captured his attention. They were filled with a deep sadness that seemed to touch his soul. "My dear," he said softly, kneeling beside her, "why do you cry?" The princess looked up, startled by his sudden appearance. I don't want to be a princess," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm not a real princess, and I've been pretending for so long that I've forgotten who I am." The prince's heart went out to her. He could see that she was genuinely upset, not putting on an act for his benefit. In that moment, he knew that he had made a mistake. He had been so focused on finding the perfect princess that he had forgotten the most important quality of all, her heart. "My dear," he said, taking her hands in his, "it doesn't matter if you're a princess or not. What matters is who you are on the inside." The princess looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're the first person who has ever treated me like this." And so the prince and the princess spent the day talking, sharing their hopes and dreams for the future. He learned that she was kind, intelligent, and compassionate. Everything he had ever wanted in a wife. As the sun began to set, the prince knew that he had found the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. But he still had one final test for her. He took her to the throne room and presented her with a single white rose. "My dear," he said, "I want you to plant this rose in the royal garden. If it blooms before sunrise, then I'll know that you are truly a princess." The princess was puzzled, but she accepted the rose and went out to the garden. She planted the rose and then hurried home to get some sleep. As she lay in bed, she couldn't help but wonder if she was really a princess. She had never felt a strong connection with her parents, and she had always felt like an outsider in the royal court. But as she thought about the prince, she knew that he didn't care about her status. He cared about who she was as a person. With that realization, she fell asleep, her doubts fading away. In the morning, the princess got up early and went back to the garden to check on the rose. To her surprise, it had already bloomed, and it was the most beautiful rose she had ever seen. She rushed back to the castle and burst into the prince's bedroom. "My rose has bloomed," she cried. "I'm a princess. I'm a princess." The prince awoke and smiled. "I knew you were a princess all along," he said. "It's not about the rose or the pea, my dear. It's about who you are." And so the prince and the princess lived happily ever after, proving that true love can conquer all, even a stubborn prince and a tiny pea.